while we were waiting for schema.org adoption, and we were trying to get publishers to start buying into LRMI and trying to kind of give them some other benefits other than the search engines, we talked a lot about other platforms and other projects that were paying attention to LRMI and will be utilizing LRMI. And that's what this next session is going to focus on. inBloom, the Learning Registry, and other tools that are taking advantage of LRMI. And so here to talk, to start for inBloom is Sue Cowden.
Welcome to the panel. With the microphones turned the other way so that they can talk. What Dave said is what we were charged with and what we want to do is really talk about some of the tools that can be used. And I am definitely not going to talk about the indexing. I'm not going to talk about getting it in. I'm going to talk about the other side of that. And so I think that's what we all want to do. The goal was for you to leave with real examples and specific uses that you can take back to, your departments, the state of Nebraska. I know you have, and some of you are from publishers, content creators, and providers. So take some tools back, things you can start using immediately. So, and also, I remember my first day. I started with inBloom in April. It wasn't my first day, but my first experience with LRMI and LR and LRI. And at the end of the day, you had had a great introduction because I kind of put my head down and I went, huh? And I think that's probably where some of you are, and we want to eliminate those huhs as much as possible. So you have more questions than answers, but at least questions. I was at the point I couldn't even ask questions. Say, what's going on? So that's what we want to do in the few minutes that we have here. Let me just introduce myself, and each panel member will introduce themselves and what they do. There are 4 of us here with inBloom. I think you've heard that today. And what inBloom does is our mission is interoperability. We're a not-for-profit. And we really provide services for schools, a secure data store, cloud-based data store, so that schools can put all of their data, their student data, in one place. And then they can tailor instruction. So we've been talking about the LRMI and getting materials into the Learning Registry so that we can tailor instruction. The other side of inBloom is single sign-on. That's really the vision, that digital promise. What if, as a teacher, I could sit down, single sign-on, get all that student data in one place, and then tailor the instruction? That's what inBloom is about. And we're all going to be here, those of you that want to talk today, as well as the rest of the EdNet conference. So please talk to any of us from inBloom, and we'll be glad to continue the conversation. But we're going to move it now, as I said, just to that tailor instruction. So what is inBloom asking you to do? Contribute content to the Learning Registry. That's really what we're asking you to do. It's very simple. And by content, I shouldn't say content, that's kind of shorthand, but it's the metadata. So your content isn't sitting in the Learning Registry, but we all say that, and now that you know what we mean, it's tagging your content to the Learning Registry. This is the inBloom publish cycle, and I just like to use that so I can kind of explain what we do with inBloom. And I think if you're going to tag, and you probably have been thinking about this all day, it's really a gamble, right? You're taking a bet on a couple things. I don't think it's a large gamble. I don't think it's a big gamble. I think 2 things probably. Number 1, you're gambling on, will teachers and students access and use data differently than they have in the past? I don't know. What do you think? It's not a big gamble, is it? It's really the vision that many of us have had, even those of us that started in education before there were computers. I don't know who those people would be, but it's the vision we've had, so it's not a huge gamble. And then I think the second gamble, and again, not a huge gamble, is effective content is worth paying for, or is effective content worth paying for. And Lisa and a couple of you have mentioned this about really OER content and the commercial for-profit content working together. And if you believe effective content is worth paying for, and I do come from the publishing side, I worked at Houghton Mifflin in the past as well as other publishers, then it's not a big gamble. But those are really the 2 things inBloom is thinking about, looking at, and saying, contribute your content into the Learning Registry. So I'm going to walk over here because I also used to work for Promethean, and I'm ready for my board, and I want to write on this, and I want to teach you. You're the content provider. OER, commercial, doesn't make any difference. Tag your content to the LRMI and to the Common Core State Standards. Publish that content into the Learning Registry. That's what we're asking you to do. Everybody in this room that's been talking is really asking you to do that. Publish that metadata into the Learning Registry. And then you say, oh good, how do I get it out? Because you've seen tools today, so you know that's happening. Well, one way in the future, as you've heard everybody talk about, is we hope that those search engines and the potato salad search will be that education search. That's what we don't know when, but we hope that will happen. But in the meantime, because inBloom, again, we're not for profit, and we're trying to provide some tools to help all of you and help the marketplace move forward, we have an API, and that's blue is us, the inBloom. We have a Learning Registry Index, that's what we're calling it, really, which says, let me take some stuff out of the Learning Registry. And the stuff we're taking out of the Learning Registry, don't you love my technical wording? The stuff we're taking out of the Learning Registry is stuff that you tagged to the LRMI and Common Core State Standards. We are going to listen for an assertion, and when we get that assertion, we're going to pull that out. We have an API you can use, and results. So look over here at this, because this is what could happen in the marketplace. Right now, you saw our inBloom tagger. Somebody demonstrated that today. We also have an inBloom search tool and a browser. So you could use that browser and search tool right now to go. It's going to come through the Learning Registry, find what's in the LRI, and find what's in the Learning Registry. You can use that right now. These are open source tools that are available in the marketplace that will be part of the community. They'll be added upon, they'll be improved, there'll be new features, but that's what exists right now. But if I'm a commercial vendor or a not-for-profit vendor, I can design one of those recommendation engines you were talking about. Someone was talking about that earlier. I can use our API to pull material from the Learning Registry, and I now have a recommendation engine that I can pull and organize into my product. And I think some for-profit, McGraw-Hill, I can give you an example of what you could possibly do, not that you would need my help, but you know, any publisher has, and it's an adaptive learning platform, or you've got a material, you've got that backbone. We're using all the analogies, Michael, we got everything here. You're the vertebrae, you've got that curriculum. But you also know that teachers value other materials that are appropriate to be used, like the OER materials. So you, as a publisher, content provider, could create one of those recommendation engines using our services, and you'd have a complete circle of the product. Yes, here's the curriculum to follow, and here's some other resources that you can tailor instruction when and appropriate. So that's really a little bit of what we're looking at. Jason, who's also on the inBloom team, is going to talk to you later more specifically about the Learning Registry Index. We're also going to talk about the Learning Registry. So I think you're going to see that whole cycle there. I call it the inBloom published cycle because another thing that we're trying to do at inBloom to encourage more content in that Learning Registry, more content tagged to the LRMI, is we've set up a program within our ecosystem, and our program is called inBloom Published. That program, it's open, you can read that yourself here, but it's to expand the market opportunity, and to do that with a logo that says, hey, look at me, my content's tagged to the LRMI. My content's going to show up when you're using the Learning Registry and pulling materials from that Learning Registry. I think it's also an important way to look at it, what that inBloom published really, and you've heard everybody talk about this today, increasing discoverability. You know, using those content products in a variety of ways. And I'm just trying to think about what I've heard today. The learning maps, which I heard Tim was talking about, the learning literacy map, right? Isn't that
the screen map?
Yep, yep. So learning map tools, content recommendation engines, a couple people today have talked about that as a future and where we're moving. Lesson planning applications, we haven't talked about that much, but really looking at planning my lesson as a teacher and the recommendations of content I'd use to put that together. That's another type learning map. Content collaboration tools. So Those of you that are interested, talk to us later. We are looking at how we can help you make sure your content is tagged correctly. You've got a lot of people in this room who've said that. And then we have a logo that we want you to use to help increase your market opportunity and your market visibility. I think I forgot to say that we want to get questions at the end. So after the four of us, we're going to stop, make sure we've got some time for questions. You have a good picture of inBloom. That was my goal. You have a good picture of a couple of these tools. Jason's going to follow up more, and I'll turn it over to Thor.
Thanks, Sue. I don't have a lot of slides, and I have just very simple information for you. The reason we're involved is we're really helping figure out for publishers, there's a lot of technical implementation parts of Learning Registry and LRMI. We talked a bit about that, about tagging and about subscribing and getting the updates and such. But one of the things we're making possible is essentially a Sandbox, a Learning Registry node. What that means is you can have your own private instance of the Learning Registry node as a publisher, so you can practice and essentially test all your tagging to that private node. How is it appearing? How am I able to search against that? Also sort of test out all the functionality and features of Learning Registry, which includes pushing updates as well as deletions, signing your tags, signing the LRMI you've tagged into it, and basically give you enough comfort for your internal workflow processes to get them all set up and correctly set up so that when it comes time to make it a public, official Learning Registry node, you can now do that, either by taking your Sandbox and making it the public one you want to host, or just simply now that you know how to talk to a Learning Registry node, simply point to a public one like inBloom's or others. So we're working with AAP, Dave, and Michael at Educational Systemics on all the technical parts of setting up a bunch of sandboxes for publishers interested in doing this. So that's essentially coming this fall. I believe we're planning on having it ready early November. But Dave will be the guy who will be taking requests for sandboxes at that time. So that's all I had to share.
Basically, I wanted to kind of give you guys have heard a lot about what Learning Registry come around, be talked about a couple times today. And many of you are probably came and asked, what is Learning Registry, who it is it, and what. It's a project that's backed by Department of Ed and Advanced Distributed Libraries, I believe, ADL, which is part of DoD, and a lot of community members such as inBloom, OER Commons, Navigation North, California, Florida, UEN, Illinois. But Learning Registry is not a destination. It's not a website. It's not a search engine. Or a repository. It's definitely something else. It's the kind of the backbone of this whole backbone of all these systems. It is like a messaging system. It's a store and forward data exchange network upon which diverse user services can be built, such as inBloom's Index and Browse, Illinois' portal, ISLE portal. But what is it doing? Today you've seen a lot of different things that people do. When they're online, they go through and they tag resources, they clicked on them, they rated them. But today that's kind of acts as it's a data exhaust. It's not being used to do anything. It's not powering anything. And what we want it to do is power the social life of learning resources. Here we have an example of data that's found in the Learning Registry overlaid on top of your Google search results. But how does this work? It's a timeline for the most part. The resource publishers publish some metadata at the beginning or anywhere in the timeline. Teacher might like some kind of animation that they've done. CT Online comes in and aligns a resource to Common Core. All this data is aggregated together and digested by many different people. So we've already seen examples in Illinois where Tim did a great demo of showing that some of the things he didn't talk about, or is it the social portion of the website where you can sort by best rated and most visited and most favorited and commented. Other work that we were doing that we just worked with free, the Federal Registry for Educational Excellence has got we're now having all the resources being powered by the Learning Registry. It used to be an old, dilapidated, manually curated set of resources. Now it's taking all these resources that are being published by many people, many organizations, and elevating them through free. The next thing that we're going to as far as what's coming up and what we're going to be doing next is we're working with the LRMI group on free as well, where we're working with Benetech and ADL to add accessibility metadata using the new schema.org vocabulary and the accessibility metadata vocabulary, as well as LRMI. So one of the things that we've done this year is we've added record replacement. So it used to be data when you published in the Learning Registry, it was immutable. You couldn't change it. We've made that now so you can publish updates and deletes. We have a sitemap concept, which is kind of a very new way I can kind of show. Let's see, how do I get to a web browser here? Where we use a web, where we can use standard web technologies to crawl the contents of the Learning Registry. Oh, is there no network on here? Oh, we'll skip that then. And then we're also working with the community, to develop LRMI bindings using JSON-LD, or using JSON-LD to incorporate multiple vocabularies such as schema.org, LRMI, Dublin Core, and accessibility. And then the next thing that's kind of coming up is we're working on looking at metadata for the commercial content in LR. A lot of things that how do we address in this public environment where everybody's kind of publishing everything, is what do we do about content that has a paywall? We want to address that issue. We've got some ideas. How do I determine what I already have access to? I may have had an agreement with Pearson to access some online resources. How do I know when I perform a search on inBloom, for example, I perform a search, how do they know, how can they target in and filter that content out and know that I have access to that content? So getting to a point where we have personalized search. And then just some places where you can get more information about Learning Registry in general. With that, I'll pass it on to Jason.
Cool. Thank you, Jim. And what he's really leading, a lot of these tools conceptually have been worked for a number of years. I was on the Learning Registry project when I was at the U.S. Department of Education, more as a validator and somebody to help think about how it would be used in different educational tools. Where he's beginning to take us with the commercial side, how to help prevent these paywalls and automatically understand what content is applicable, not only in licensing constructs, but also accessibility. It looks like there's some standards that are underway that are being developed in the context of professional development. I think that all of that work is going to be very strongly useful to the next steps of the Learning Registry in this digital content ecosystem. So if you're interested in taking part of that, I'm also starting to work with that as Jim and Steve Midgeling and other folks have started to queue that up. Please let us know, because we'd like to have that feedback early on. I know it's a bit after lunch. I'm going to get into a bit of details. So if you put your head on the table and snooze, I will not be offended, because I'm also feeling the delicious desserts a little bit and slowing down myself. But just want to talk about some of the tools that inBloom is helping to put out into the digital content ecosystem. In looking at this, the Learning Registry now is, 3, 4, 5 years old. It's become a very mature technology, as Jim said. There's a lot of patterns in there now, updates, deletes that a mature data system should have. And of course, that's all in the open source community. So really getting a good sense that's something that's ready to be utilized in a large scale way. LRMI, of course, that was a 2-3 year initiative, finally got the adoption from schema.org, and now really allow us to use that as a common conversation on how do we shape this educational content in metadata to be able to use in systems like this. inBloom's contributions are building on top of all of that work. As Sue mentioned, we are non-for-profit, so everything that we do is for the community benefit. And what we're doing is creating some additional services around that to help make a commodity out of some of these things, right? And I'll talk a little bit more about open source and what we're doing with that. But just to talk about the tools that we're building on top of these various more core technologies, the Learning Registry Index is one of them. This is built in coordination with the Learning Registry product. As Jim mentioned, the Learning Registry is a transfer mechanism that allows for that data to be stored and move around different nodes and repositories. We're building a service layer on top of that allows some searchability to occur. So as your EdTech products could ask things like, find me a video resource under 15 minutes that apply to the 3rd grade level, age ranges between 7 and 9, that have been rated more than 4 stars. The Learning Registry Index is there to help provide your education tools answers back to answer those questions and to support personalized learning. It's a back-end interface, so this is not something that you log into. This is something that you build the search tagger tools, the content recommendation engines on top of that talk to this infrastructure level service. The status of this, we've been working on this for over a year. We have a 1.0 version. After getting that out there and getting a lot of feedback, we've actually now moved it to a 1.5 version, which brings some further refinements to even closely coupled to the needs of these tools that we're talking about. We're going to be open sourcing that sometime fall 2013, so just a few weeks, if not a month, right around the corner. Another tool that hasn't been out there yet, but what we've been talking about is a Learning Maps authoring tool. What this is designed for are curricular experts, as well as teachers, to be able to tie together relationships between standards. So as we think about blended learning and personalized learning, digital tools allow for customization and personalization down to either groups or down to students, and that means that not everybody has to follow the same sequence at the same time. So this Learning Maps authoring tool allows a state or a district to be able to connect those nodes, and then from that also contribute that to a digital tool to provide a student or a classroom a roadmap on how to progress through those standards. Again, an open source tool that we're developing, also to be released sometime here in fall of 2013. And just to provide a view of what that looked like, this is right now in beta. We're doing the internal testing. But as you see, you have a standards map along to a standards directory off to the left. You could drag and drop those off to the right surface, and then develop the progressions, the relationships, and then sometimes when they're packed together, you could bring all of those together and then export that out into digital tools, including the Learning Registry. So look for that. That's something, pay attention to the inBloom.org website if that's something you're interested in, or grab one of our cards, and we're happy to let you know where to find this once it's online. And just a note, we call these exemplar tools. Our purpose behind these is not to deliver applications for schools to use. As we're an open source company, we're looking to develop commodity level services to help accelerate lift all boats in the marketplace, to solve some of the common challenges that states can't tackle on their own, or that particular vendors can't tackle on their own. So while we have some tools here, the real intention is not to use them in schools or districts. It's to provide examples of what this technology, the core services, the LRI, the data store, could do with the technology. So these are examples. They're open source. They're open source in a very permissive model. So you could actually take these, build something around it, no requirements to contribute that back, and then further extend. And we very much encourage that. And I know there's been some confusion around the intention of these tools, so I just want to clearly state that. The tagger tool is to Sue for demonstrating that earlier. Again, designed for curricular experts and educators to tag educational materials, which outputs into LRMI. In using standards right now, we have Common Core in there. We're looking to extend that to other standards, support for state standards, national, next generation science standards, and et cetera, in the longer term. As you've seen in that tool, we support both individual items. So if you have a web page and you just want to immediately tag that nice preview pane, you could go through the LRMI attributes and show and make the assertions there. Also, bulk upload capabilities. So taking your CSV spreadsheet, uploading it to that, doing the verification, and then exporting it back out. This does publish into the Learning Registry, so it also helps save an additional step. And full end-to-end solutions. And this is in open source today. So if you go to, this is more of a tech note, to our github.org/inBloom. It's a very popular code repository where people are sharing products like this. You can actually pull that down, run it, make your own modifications to it. That is all supported. One thing that, again, we're really looking to open source in education really hasn't been widely adopted. One of the things that I could think of off the top of my head is Moodle, the LMS system that is probably one of the more popular examples in this. And we know that with NSDL and Illinois, we've seen a lot of other examples of this too. But we really want to start encouraging open source contributions to this. So, for example, right now we don't have workflow support or multiple user support built into the tagger tool. If that's something that your organization is interested in adopting, please feel free to take that source code, building that feature in, and now using that out in front of your customers. It's good if you check it back into the open source community, if you believe it's a commodity sort of level resource, but there's no sort of restrictions to making a product based off of that. These are good innovations in the market, and we want to support that. And then, of course, now you are in position to offer professional services to your customers around that particular tool. And thank you again, Sue, for the demonstration of that tool, as well as the demonstration from Tim on the other tools in nanoscale of what that looks like. Next level of tools, search and browser tools. So we could now assume that we tagged the content using the tagger tool. That gets published into the Learning Registry, comes out of Learning Registry Index. We know there's a lot of moving pieces. Now we have tools to search that and browse that and get that out of the Learning Registry. The browser tool really sort of allows you to walk down the aisle of digital resources, sort of as you'd walk down a library, down different Dewey Decimal aligned columns. This is that same metaphor, but now using LRMI as a guide. The search tool is actually being able to use free text searches plus filtering around those LRMI attributes to target those those resources. So 2 different views of how to find content that you're looking for in a classroom. Again, open source, it's available there today on our GitHub account. Pull it down, modify it how you'd like. In the future, we're thinking, this might be too early to say, but we're thinking about merging these tools together as they're very closely related. There's an example of our search tool, so you'll see that you'll be able to do a free text search there to start your search. So I did one here on fractions, and then you've got all of the LRMI filters here to further bring down that result set, including the dot notation.
This is searching the Learning Registry right now?
Yes. Yes, actually it's built on top of the Learning Registry Index. It's sort of a intermediary service to help bring those results, but we're pulling more and more content in from the Learning Registry. Just to note, that's a really good question. At this point, we're only supporting LRMI tagging because we know that there's so many different formats out there, and from a technical aspect, we just don't have enough bandwidth to accommodate all of them. So as I think that we're, in this room, we're all coalescing around LRMI, that's also our focus because it has that really good educational targeting and descriptive language. So yeah, if it's LRMI based, it should be here in this tool. Here's a look into the inBloom LRMI browser. So again, just a different perspective. You could also do a free text search. Up on to the right, you've got some nice filtering capabilities, but this allows you to look at the standards, and then down below, it's actually not showing this, but then resources that are aligned to those standards. So 2 different perspectives. Just to provide a community update and to build on what Jim was saying, in the usage of LRMI, the early adopters of us have all worked with a number of formats, maybe a little bit of struggle around how to do this correctly. So as we take LRMI, what is the right way to represent that in data systems like the Learning Registry? Again, this is technically minded, okay to take a quick nap. But what is the right data structure to get that into the Learning Registry? In talking with a number of the leads, Jim Clow and some people from Google and people who have shaped the standard, this is feeling like a really good fit. And finally, we could just kind of close the door on the question of, should we use microdata tagging or another format or develop our own format? This JSON LD format has really proved to be a good one on how to take metadata and then contribute it into the Learning Registry. Right now on the LRMI list, you may notice that there's a lot of conversation around this. We definitely contribute that. I sort of helped take all of the community feedback, coalesce that, understand more of the JSON LD, put that into a solid specification. We're iterating around that, including adding accessibility metadata standards, internationalization support, professional development standards. So we really want to make this a comprehensive document so you can hand it to your technical teams and say, this is how you shape that LRMI metadata to get it into systems like the Learning Registry. So do look for that. If you have technically minded folks on your team, would definitely love to hear contributions into that. Our hopes are to seal that up, at least to get to a really good working final draft within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And what that's going to help is, if you see in some of the tools, in the inBloom Tagger tool, we don't get some of the LRMI metadata that's in the Learning Registry. In the free tool, also don't see some of the content from the inBloom Tagger. We want to help bring that together, and the way to do that is to have one data standard building off of the LRMI content standard in order to achieve that. And just in case if you haven't had an opportunity to see Microsoft Word, that's what Microsoft Word looks like, and then that's a specification down below it. And then lastly, a thing that I'm working on very strongly with Sue's expertise, over a decade or so, expertise in the publisher realm. How do we take all of these things and bring them together to provide one consistent guidance for a publisher to contribute into this digital content ecosystem? So this includes the overview, the marketplace, the ecosystem, the value propositions. What does this mean to do content tagging? Maybe some guidance around how to do that well. And then also bring some tools to that. So the Jim and the Learning Registry community has a lot of scripts out there for the sort of really techie stuff of making a Learning Registry envelope, extracting things out of CSV and converting them into the right format, digitally signing it, contributing to bulk into the Learning Registry, and then validating that it's in there correctly. All of those sort of techie sort of tools that your tech implementers need, put that together in one package, both with the sort of business side and the technical side into a guidance guide. So look forward to that. We're also looking forward to publishing that. That'll be out in the open on the inBloom website sometime at the end of October 2013. And again, once we get that out there, we'd love to hear community feedback for the things that we've missed. So that was a quick update on the tools and guidance of what we're putting together from the inBloom side, as well as working with the other members of the community. If you have any interest in seeing what we're doing or bringing feedback or want to be an early implementation partner, we very much encourage that. We really, all this sort of techie stuff doesn't make sense until it really comes up through the tools and makes sense for educators. So very much highly encourage that participation. And Sue, did you want to say any more remarks in closing out this particular session? Yeah, come on up.
We definitely want to make sure, because we have an illustrious panel that is sitting there, that we have some time to answer any questions, both technical questions as well as just in the marketplace. But I think, I think you've seen the cycle, and our goal was that you would see, by tagging that content, the value in the marketplace. And so a combination of the recommendation engines and tagging tools coming together, I think that's what we wanted to make sure you saw, as well as the tools that you have available. So can we answer any questions?
I was just wondering about your JSON specification.
Yes.
And it looks like you now have some elements that are required, like title or URL. I was just wondering, as far as the Learning Registry goes, how will those be required?
Right. So I've gotten some feedback, in fact, from your developer Dave on that list, and then Steve came back around and even added to that. It's a challenge, right? It's a challenge because we want this all to show up in the digital tools in sort of a similar way, or at least in a most meaningful way. In regards to that particular question about the name, we're going to back that off a little bit and call that a highly recommended. Some of those required fields are actually necessary for the JSON LD format, just to say that these are the starting elements to get that going. But other than that, we want to make it just the minimal, right? I think just the same way that you said in your session in Dublin Core, you have a title and a URL of a resource, and then all that other stuff is highly valuable, but you may not have it in your metadata catalog. We're going to go down that same path. I don't believe that we would, at least from our side, exclude any of the metadata that's out there that doesn't follow that format. It may not make sense to the tools that's consuming it, but still, it's good to have it in the context of the Learning Registry, regardless. I know, Jim, you're also working on some validation services. I don't know if that plays into this as far as like when data formats come in. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I've already done, and it's out in the public domain, is some validation services onto Learning Registry that allows you to publish into it, that it validates your document against the original microdata formatted JSON content. And I'm going to be updating those by the end of the year to accommodate the JSON LD format of publishing to do that. Now, as far as how required fields work, the initial one, I didn't really have any required fields when we did it. It was more of checking that the structure was correct and that the properties kind of aligned with classes and such that within schema.org, but there was no enforcement of you had to have a title, you had to have a name, you have to have a URL. Those things weren't enforced. And I would envision that in the JSON LD iteration, it will probably follow that same mechanism.
Yeah. And this really comes from a best practices standpoint, right? Less than a technical standpoint. And we know that the metadata catalogs that are out there have varying levels of complexity within its own metadata. So we want to find a right balance between how can we all sort of agree as a community, not a technical, but as a community, and what are the most valuable tags, and then promote those. Because one of the things that we don't want to do is have these say, no name found, no name, because then the teachers just can say, I don't know that. And also, we do want to, as much as possible, enable more of these, right? So as metadata publishers contribute into the learning registry and they have this information, that values the teacher even more in the granularity around their searches. So it's a balance, and I think that we should just continue to discuss it on the LRMI list and find the right balance.
So, in watching this project evolve, it seems like there has been a move from initially like wanting to model a marketplace, so wanting to model what it would look like to exchange data. So the original learning registry vision, as I've heard from Steve, is like this stream. Anything can come in, anything can go out. And it seems to be, from my perspective, as someone who's tried to play in that, is moving more towards being a repository itself. It's starting to look and feel a lot more like this concept here is a lot more like, I don't know, like OER comment, like drill down, or like NSTL, it's like drill down. So I think there's a little bit of tension. If you are providing a market and providing like how people would input it, like providing some standards for how people would put stuff in and pull stuff out, that's interesting. If what you said is that you're starting to model best practices and part of your work is modeling what's possible, then there's a little bit of a tension there. Like if people buy in, like are they buying into the market, to the infrastructure, or are they buying into the idea that this is the place to think about models and to play and to, there's a little bit of a tension there.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah. And I know the work that we're doing on our team is that we just want to help encourage a platform for innovation, right? So I mean, there's so many great repositories of information out there. Unfortunately, not a lot of them are speaking to each other, right? So there's OER Commons work that you're doing, there's Curriki, there's NASA, Smithsonian, PBS catalogs, and for a content, and I can think of a few commercial examples or nonprofit examples that are trying to bring those together, but still the sort of infrastructure level services aren't quite there to enable like the tools, the content recommendation engines, the learning maps tools to bring the performance data with the content to make the next recommendations along the pathways. So I'd be very much interested in like what is, I mean, especially tremendously valuable content repository that you have. What is the right way to help connect what you have there, still maintain, as you said earlier, the credibility around the curation, which is strongly valuable around high quality resources, but still connect them to tools that want to get them in front of teachers in a valuable way.
We should talk, because our model around that interoperability problem has changed, and so often what you're thinking of now as repositories are more curriculum improvement engines themselves, and so those lines are going to start to blur.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's also an element of, like, going back to your question of, is it a repository or is it an ecosystem? And the analogy I always like to think about with the Learning Registry is it's just like search engines when there was still Lycos and Alta Vista. And that the idea is that, there's a whole new industry, search engine optimization, that never existed prior to Google, essentially. And the Learning Registry is essentially enabling an SEO analog for content itself. So part of it is a publisher, through optimizing how it's doing metadata, it's actually in their best interest to really fine-tune and fill out as much as possible and all the sort of synonyms and related content, so it improves the searchability, the findability, discoverability, which ultimately will drive sales. And I think that's sort of the business case argument to make to publishers is, this is very technical, but just look at how much SEOs impact your business in driving traffic to your website. Now imagine if you could actually drive traffic to sales, to teachers actually using products they've already subscribed to. So this is, and I think part of where LR is right now is, it's about publishing data. It's a chicken and egg problem. You've got to get the data in there first, and then we can start working on the paradata parts too, which is the sort of completes that cycle.
And the other thing is that I don't know that it's totally lost its initial vision in the sense of being a marketplace. I mean, it's still very open. It still allows everybody to do, publish anything you want. You don't have to publish in JSON LD. You don't have to publish in micro formats. You can publish in Dublin Core or whatever you want. That is, and it still is that. The vision is what the marketplace will, what the community in the marketplace decide that they want to go. Currently, the community is looking at taking a good look at LRMI and JSON LD and specific formats, and that seems to make sense to the community. So it's a kind of a crowdsourced solution that lots of people. It's like it didn't just kind of overnight. Somebody said we're going to go down this route and we're going to support. It was actually kind of a happy circumstance. Jason kind of popped up, hey, this JSON LD thing, what's a better way to do this? And I kind of said, hey, we should go look at JSON LD. It looks like the schema.org people are really interested in it. We talked with Google, Dan Brickley over at Google, and they're really kind of excited about it and started kind of building that community effort around it to where a lot of people really wanted like that and are latching on to it. So, Learning Registry, if it were to change tomorrow and somebody wants to go after XYZ standard,